Welcome to podcast 6.3, a brief discussion about the cardiovascular system. A few objectives. We need to describe the anatomy and function of the cardiovascular system. We also need to discuss how blood flows from the heart throughout the body. And then we also need to understand how the body gets nourishment, oxygen and nourishment. So the cardiovascular system is also known as the circulatory system. It consists of the heart, blood vessels, and blood. It's responsible for delivering oxygen, nutrients, and fluids to the body cells while taking carbon dioxide to the lungs and carrying waste products from all over the body to the kidneys for excretion. It also plays a crucial role in carrying hormones to target organs. Think about your heart as a highly efficient muscular organ. It's about the size of a closed fist and is located in the chest cavity between the two lungs, posterior to the sternum, slightly left of midline. The heart is basically divided into four chambers called or compartments. The upper chambers being the atria, the lower chambers being the ventricles. The two chambers on the right are separated from the two on the left by a wall. You can see more about the structures and naming here in this figure. The heart functions as two pumps, a right-sided pump and a left-sided pump. The right side pumps blood to the lungs. The left side pumps blood to the rest of the body and the heart. It goes from the body through the aorta to the heart through the coronary arteries. The coordination of pumping is regulated through a specialized, fascinating group of electrical network of cells that pace the heart. Pacemaker cells create an electric current. It's conducted through the heart and causes the muscles to contract in a coordinated way. Under normal conditions, the dominant pacemaker cells provide the electric impulse for coordinated contractions. Electric impulse begins in the muscle, the right atrium, and spreads throughout both atria, causing contraction of both atria. The impulse then spreads to cells in the right and left ventricles, leading to the coordinated contraction of both ventricles. This coordination results in oxygenated blood being pumped out of the heart. The right side supplies blood to the lungs oxygenate it, and the left side supplies oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. The heart's pacemaker cells generally fire at a basic rate. In a diseased heart, if one of those pacemaker cells fails, the next one in line in that chain takes over. Often this can result in less coordinated contraction and in a slower heart rate. Abnormalities in the heart's electrical system lead to an abnormal heartbeat or rhythm called arrhythmia. Now let's discuss the blood vessels. Arterioles and arterioles carry blood away from the heart to the lungs and body. Veins and venules bring that blood back to the heart, and the capillaries are the ones that connect the arteries to the veins. In this figure, you can see the pulmonary arteries, and you can basically follow the blood around through the heart, through the lungs. Capillaries connect the arterial side of the vascular system to the venous side. Very small tubes near all the body cells provide nutrients, oxygen, and other substances to the cells. Through the capillaries, the waste products enter the bloodstream and are carried to the kidneys and lungs to be excreted. The venous system carries blood from the tissues back to the heart. The venous blood still has some oxygen in it, but far less than arterial blood. The exception being the pulmonary veins. That's where oxygenated blood from the lungs is carried to the heart. On the venous side, venules on the other side of the capillaries are the smallest tubes that carry blood back to the heart. The superior and inferior vena cava, the largest veins, act as reservoirs, supplying oxygenated, depleted blood to the heart. Now let's talk about the blood that the heart is pumping. There's four main components of blood. We've got white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets, and plasma. So what is the function of red blood cells? Imagine the red blood cell being the boxcar. It's actually the one that's carrying oxygen to the body's cells. It assists in removing carbon dioxide as well from them. Oxygen is carried primarily by the hemoglobin in those red blood cells, and it's the iron in the hemoglobin of red blood cells that gives blood its red color. Carbon dioxide, and the alternative, is actually dissolved primarily in the plasma and is generally in the form of carbonic acid. Now, what do white blood cells do? White blood cells are part of the body's immune system. They help the body defend itself against types of infection, and there are other types of white blood cells that exist throughout the body. All right, platelets and plasma, the last two of the four parts. Platelets form blood clots that help stop bleeding. And plasma carries the blood cells and nutrients to the tissue and carries waste products away from the organs. So let's talk about that circulation piece. Blood makes a complete circuit through the body. How does it do it? Well, number one, the heart's right atrium receives blood from the vena cava. That right atrium pumps it through a one-way valve to the left ventricle. The right atrium pumps it through a one-way valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle in turn pumps the blood through another one-way valve into the pulmonary arteries. Those arteries then go to the lungs for oxygenation of the blood. That oxygenated blood returns and blood flows through the pulmonary veins from the lungs to the left atrium of the heart. The left atrium receives the oxygen-rich blood and delivers it through a valve in the left ventricle. And then that blood is pumped through another one-way valve into the aorta, a major artery that leaves the left side of the heart and then onto the artery. Those arteries travel throughout the body, carrying that oxygenated blood through the tissues, and those arteries branch into increasingly smaller vessels called arterioles. Eventually, those narrow arterial vessels carry blood to the smallest blood vessels, the capillaries. Once in the capillaries, nutrients into the blood through the thin capillary walls into the cells, while waste passes from those cells back into the capillaries. Blood then from the left ventricle to the body. A wave of pressure called the blood pressure can be felt by palpating arterial pulse points. There are 5 main arteries close to the skin where the pulse can be taken: carotid, the brachial, the radial, dorsalis pedis, and femoral. As an OEC technician, you'll likely be taking a pulse at the radial, brachial, and carotid positions. Now, how is blood pressure measured? Blood pressure consists of 2 measures: systolic over diastolic. Systolic is when the left ventricle squeezes and that maximum contraction squeezes blood into the aorta. Diastolic pressure, is when the left ventricle is at rest, and it represents the lowest pressure maintained in the arteries. It's measured in millimeters of mercury, and blood pressure is expressed as systolic over diastolic. For example, 120 over 80, which is written 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. That's all we've got in this short discussion about the cardiovascular system. Please check back for OEC 6, Chapter 6, for a more detailed discussion of cardiovascular system. Thanks.